All right. Hey, Taylor.
Hi, Shakira.
What's up? How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's like overcast
I
and cooling
know.
down and making me think we might actually have some sort of fall. So,
Yeah, is this like the tip? I mean, you're from we're so just so everyone knows, we are both currently in LA. We met in New York. We'll talk about how we met, but I'm just
yeah.
curious, like, is this typical for LA? Like, because it's been like this for a while. Wake up, it's like complete overcast, and then it kind of gets bright again.
I think so, if I remember correctly. I mean, I feel like I'm that person who's like, back in my day, we had rain. So I don't really know what's typical anymore because the weather has
So
clearly changed
much.
so much
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
last couple decades. But I do think that this feels familiar, this sort of like foggy, kind of thick, dense cloud air that forces things to cool down.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm
yeah,
enjoying it.
it's nice. I saw that
Yeah.
it was supposed to maybe even rain this weekend, and I was like, "What?" And then it disappeared. So it
Oh.
was a big tease, but like that prospect seems really promising. I would love some
Yeah.
rain.
I'm excited
Uh,
for like the cool down because like on the East Coast, it's like beautiful fall
I know.
leaves. And, I'm not
Sweaters.
necessarily like missing, like, I don't want to be on the East Coast because I don't like the cold, but there is like that nice nostalgic feeling that I'm kind of missing a little bit. So,
Totally. Yeah, I get that. When it was like, it's sweater weather over here. And I was like, I want a breeze. Like I would like to wear a sweater.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited that we might be moving in that direction.
Good. Yeah. All right, so let's I guess start talking about astrology. um, so today we're recording on Friday, October 23rd. Um, first day of Scorpio season. Um,
Ooh, by Libra
and
season.
yeah, by Libra season. We're good on that. Um,
Over.
but I have my good friend Taylor Ursula with me today. And we're going to talk all about the 12th house and hypnosis. So I hope hope you're ready for this one. Um, so Taylor, why don't you introduce yourself, share your SMR if you're comfortable with that. And yeah, tell us a little bit about your practice.
Sure. So I'm Taylor Ursula. I am a Pisces sun and moon and a Capricorn rising. And my practice is sort of broad. I'm very involved in astrology. Tarot was my first modality that I practiced. I am certified Reiki 2, and as of last year, I am also certified by the National Guild of Hypnotists to practice hypnosis. So
Wow.
that's what I'm digging into right now. So I'm very excited to be talking about it with you today.
Yay, awesome. Yeah, so and you do like birth chart readings, you do tarot as well.
Yeah, I do. I do natal and solar returns. I've been branching out into doing some Saturn Uranus square consultations for
Ooh,
next year. So that's going to be interesting and fun.
I love
Um,
that.
and yeah, I also practice Reiki. And I try to find ways to incorporate all of them together when I can, just because I think all of it is so useful and so helpful on different levels. So
Mhm.
it's been really beneficial for me to study different forms of healing and to kind of weave them together for myself first and foremost, and then to kind of branch out and bring that to other people.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about like how we know each other.
My
Because we
goodness,
obviously know each
yeah.
other. Um,
I
so I'm assuming we met through Aaron.
believe we met through Aaron. Aaron had
Okay.
just left New York for Oakland and
Okay.
said to me, you have to go to Kirah's launch party for Influx.
Yes.
It's a beautiful magazine and it's right up your alley, and you guys would really like each other, and you have to go. And I said,
Oh.
absolutely, I'm there. And it was like the coolest party I had been to in such a long time. There were readers and there were tinctures and there were like there was a tattoo artist and I got this amazing Saturn on my finger.
Oh, yay.
It was like right as Saturn was crossing my ascendant finally. And so I was like, this is meaningful. Like, this is such a cool place to be right now. And that just really opened me up to your whole world, and just like Kirah is amazing, and like this networker and just this magic maker. And so I've been engrossed ever since. And I was fortunate enough to work with you on Influx for a hot second. And yeah, I think you've just brought like blessings into my life. So I'm very excited to. It's real. It's real.
Nothing like a Pisces to make me feel good.
There you go.
Yeah. So Aaron Tax Shipley, ET. We met on Tinder in like early 2018, and we just hit it off because we were like both astrologer photographers, and yeah, we like met up maybe a couple times, and then she's like, I'm moving to the Bay, but you have to meet Taylor, and you're both like Pisces, Capricorn risings. And
yes, we are.
I have so many Cap rising friends because it's my 11th house, and
just
that makes
like
sense. Yeah, a lot of Cap rising friends.
And you are my Scorpio friend, and the Scorpio is my
11th house.
Yeah. That's really cute. I like that.
I love that. So yeah, I'm so happy that Erin connected us. Shout out to ET. She'll be on here eventually. I'm bringing her on. But yeah, and then we've just been friends ever since, really, right?
It's true. And now we're back. We're both out here in LA.
Yes.
I love our like mutual.
Yeah, our mutual like migration. Yeah, because
totally.
I remember when you told me you were thinking about moving back, and I was like, yes, like, more friends, come with me.
It was mutual. It was hard to leave New York, and so it was really nice to know that one of my favorite people was going to be coming out too, and it definitely made it easier to to say goodbye. But
yeah, for sure. Okay. So let's talk about hypnosis. Let's start out talking about hypnosis because it's something that so a little backstory. I don't know much about hypnosis, but it's always been something I've been really interested in. And there's an astrologer in New York, Sandy Citron, who I connected with early on in my entrance into the astro world. Especially locally in New York. And her and a yoga teacher, Ashley, were hosting this retreat, this yoga astrology retreat in Costa Rica. And they had asked me to come along and help with like the astrology lessons and also give readings to the folks that attended the retreat. So I did that for 2 years in a row. Wow. And awesome. It was really awesome. And what's cool is that Sandy is also an astro hypnotist like you. And so she would lead us through like hypnotism exercises lead us through hypnosis. That's what I'm trying to say. While on the retreat. And that was like my first sort of like entry into it. So yeah, also through an astrologer, which is cool, but I haven't really done much investigation into it. But I'm really curious because Sandy had said like that's how she quit smoking. I think that's how she first started like getting into it too. She was like a cigarette smoker, and that's kind of how it helped get her out of it. So yeah, tell me everything you know about hypnosis. I'm so intrigued.
Absolutely. Let's do it. I do feel like people getting into hypnosis do kind of approach it from this like, where are we? Like, I don't really know what kind of space we're entering here. But hypnosis itself is really just the focused state of awareness and absorption that we enter into at various points, honestly, throughout the day. Like looking at social media is a form of hypnosis. Like we are hypnotized by images and by messages. We enter hypnosis or a state of trance when we're watching TV. So it's something that is actually very natural to us that we don't necessarily feel connected to unless we are intentionally connected to it. So as you mentioned, totally, hypnosis can be used to alter habits, to break bad habits, to implement good new habits. It's absolutely used for change work in that sense. And it can also be used to explore past life regressions. And that's kind of how I got into it. I had spoken to a medium back in 2018 who had told me that I was a nun in a past life and that I had I had taken vows in that life that I had carried into this one that I needed to like get in touch with and understand and decide, what to do with. And I was like, wow,
It's
that
got
sounds
full
so
like tingles throughout my whole body. It's like, fuck.
It immediately resonated with me, and I felt like it explained a lot about just general attitudes I have about things, or like what I feel like I'm allowed to have. That sort of very like nun, like, no, I will abstain. And so that had really piqued a lot of interest in me. And then I started getting emails from Maha Rose about Shauna Cummins and her hypnosis practice. And I was like, oh, this is right on time. Like, this is exactly what I want to be investigating. And so I got into it that way. I booked a session with her. I saw myself as a nun in this past life. It was extremely vivid. And I ended up crying during the session. It just brought up a lot of emotions really that I had never assigned language to that suddenly started to make sense. And from there, I was really roped into this experience. It opened up this whole world of potential for me that I had never really thought was possible. So that was the spring of 2019, and by that fall, I was enrolled in Shauna Cummins' School of Divine Feminine hypnosis course, and so here I am now. So yeah, hypnosis is really it's pretty broad. It can be used for a number of things. I think it's really fascinating to use as a tool of imagination, especially for those of us processing trauma, especially those of us who have maybe some heavy 12th house placements. It's just a way of tuning into kind of your own mental scope. And I think we're very familiar with kind of who we know ourselves to be on the surface. And similar to wanting to break a habit like smoking, I think hypnosis also offers a way to kind of become aware of your own inner patterns, to kind of see maybe scenes related to some of what you experience that kind of give you context for something that you're trying to work through. And it gives you a lot of agency within your own imagination to say, okay, this is where all of these things live, and I kind of deal with those on a regular basis. So how do I build some characters or recognize some other characters that are in here that are also helpful to me?
Lovely.
That makes sense? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, so much there. I'm kind of like stuck on you being a nun in the past life, and just thinking, because that's something that I've had a medium tell me, not that I've been a nun, but that, there's been these like oaths to like particular sects.
Right.
Every time I say that word, it sounds like I'm talking about sex, but no, SCCT sects, that like magical orders that I have like said some oaths to in previous lifetimes that like I got a break, but that feels so overwhelming and daunting, and like I don't even know how to begin to like go about that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, were you like, how did you resolve that for yourself?
I think really it starts with, I'll probably say this a bunch, but it starts with the self-awareness. So being in that session in particular, she guides you toward seeing particular events or moments in the life that you're visiting. And at the end of it, there's sort of like there's like an exit interview of sorts. So you leave that life and you enter this sort of interview room, and she asks you to summarize the experience in a word. Like, what are you feeling right now? And I heard myself, it took a moment, but I heard myself say hopelessness. And I had never, like, as soon as I said the word, it just connected all of these kind of loose threads in my mind. And I almost saw my own life kind of flash before my eyes. And I had all of these moments from this life rise to the surface where that word was the applicable word to the situation. And it was like a million light bulbs going off, because I would have come up with that word on my own. But I realized in that moment that that's what my depression feels like. When I'm depressed, I feel hopeless. Like I just feel like I have no agency. I feel like my voice is completely useless, and I want to like shrink up into a ball and disappear. And so it really just opened that realization alone opened me up to so many questions and so many, I don't know, everything after that was kind of like, oh, is this coming back to this feeling? Is this connected to this feeling? And so it's a slow process. It's, it's not immediate and you walk out and you're like, okay, I'm fixed. Like I'm amazing. But it's really more just having those tools brought to your attention that you can start kind of approaching situations in real time through. And so seeing that life, feeling that word, recognizing it in my day-to-day life, or in my sort of big mental health, crisis moments, it gave me a different perspective in those moments. So I could say, yes, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling this because of something from the past. I'm feeling this because this is a theme that carries over for you. And really just seeing that for what it is, being able to step out of it, I think just helps you create a new path away from it. So I always argue that like cycles never end, like, and, we talk about this in astrology, of course, like everything comes back around. And so it's really just about kind of giving yourself the tools to climb up out of it when it does come around. And so I think that's what that experience has really given me. It's the opportunity to recognize that we can change if we are aware of what's happening and we decide to make different choices. So it kind of comes to that place of, okay, I recognize where this feeling's coming from. I understand now that this is, again, like a theme for me. I feel this, and now I'm going to choose what I want to do with it. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I'm just sitting with that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking back about like your oaths and like how would you, I mean, it's definitely curious. Like I didn't come out of it like, oh, I know what those vows were that I have to break, like now I'm goodbye vows. I see it more in my attitude, I guess. So kind of what I mentioned before about like things I feel entitled to or don't feel entitled to, or it's like, oh, why are you resisting that? Like, why do you think that someone else gets to indulge in like beauty or vanity, but you feel like you're supposed to be austere? Like, why do you think that? And so I kind of sit with those questions. I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm gonna give myself this nice thing, or like maybe I am gonna feel pretty, and like it's not a sin, So I guess it's kind of questioning those things for yourself, saying like, what are my allegiances, and like, why do I have these, and do I need to have these in this life right now? Can I look at who I give my like loyalty to, or my, who I pledge allegiance to, and what do I want to do with that now in this moment? Like, who do I want to align with? Or so yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Can you
it's definitely interesting.
Can you speak to how, like, maybe not how it worked, but like what the process is like to like even like when you are about to go into a state of hypnosis, or you're about to help someone else go into that state? Like, what is that process even like?
Sure. So, I mean, if we're doing, a proper session, although conversational hypnosis is also very valid. And
let's talk about that too.
well, when we're going into a session, really, we are having a conversation first. So something that Shauna taught me that really stuck with me is that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And so what we culturally understand about hypnosis is the very patriarchal kind of showy stage hypnosis. Like, I'm gonna make you
With
act
like
like a
the
chicken, and like,
swinging
yes,
the
you're
clock or
very
whatever.
sleepy, and yeah, absolutely. And like
Which, like, I
someone in
feel
the
like I can be
audience.
hypnotized by that when someone does that on TV.
Probably. Well, there are levels of suggestibility. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got Neptune on my ascendant. I'm pretty sure I'm extremely suggestible. I'm very gullible. Like, I cry at everything. If I see someone even thinking about having a feeling, I'm gonna have the feeling.
Yeah. See
So
someone thinking about.
like, if I just anticipate something is gonna be felt, I'm like, I'm already feeling it.
Yes, yes.
So there's definitely levels of how open we are to this stuff. And for those who kind of have trouble stepping into a state of suggestibility, you can kind of practice relaxing, practice meditating, that kind of thing, to get yourself to a place where you feel more open to that. But essentially, it starts off with a conversation. When we're having a session, first we talk about what it is that you want to change. I take the language that you give me about your own life, and I use that while we're in trance together. So I'm not planting anything, evil or dark, or, be a chicken into your mind. Like, you are the one telling me everything that I'm going to be repeating back to you. So in that sense, it's also a very like affirming, validating practice. But it's a conversation. We talk about what feels like a struggle, or what we'd like to change. And then we visualize how things can look like or feel once we're in the place we want to be. So by establishing kind of the problem state and then switching our attention to a more positive outcome, we've kind of already set the tone for what to expect, or what we'd like to expect. So we have something to look forward to. And then there's a number of relaxation practices. And there's a variety that we can pull from. It really depends on maybe what each practitioner prefers, but there's kind of the classic, like, stare at your hand and let everything in the periphery fade. And so we do a number of steps to relax and to kind of clear out outside noise first. And then there's sort of a countdown into trance. So it's very relaxing. It's a lot like getting into like a deep meditation practice, really. I love the conversation first, because it really is, we're setting up consent, we're setting up boundaries. You get to tell me what we want to talk about today. I'm not going in and, digging out memories that I don't see into your mind. It's really you having full control over what's going on in there. So yeah, I feel like it's important to set it up that way, because what we know is very much like someone's going to go into my head and like find something that I don't want you to see. And it's like, no, I don't know what's in there. I'm not in there. You're in there. I'm just helping you get in there. And then it's all you. You're the one in there.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like astrology even is more like invasive
Definitely. Actually,
than hypnosis.
I could definitely see that, because everything's just right there. It's like, oh, and this happened, huh?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like, I can see all of it.
Exactly. That's very true. In hypnosis, you really have the control. The person having the session gets to divulge as much or as little as they want. And it's really about how comfortable you feel kind of going in there within yourself. And that's, I think, what's helpful about a practitioner, is that it's a lot in here. It's scary. We don't really know where to go. If we go in there, am I going to get lost? Am I going to be overwhelmed by these feelings that I want to change? They know I want to change them, so they're going to come for me. So it's really, I'm just a tour guide. I'm the tour guide, and you're telling me where we're going.
I love that. Wow. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about the 12th house.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Do we talk? Yeah. Let's just kind of break down some general 12th house significations, because to me, it's connected. I mean, there's this weird, like, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but I'm going to use it. dichotomy between the ninth house and the 12th house, where, you know, modern astrology, contemporary astrology, we often associate the 12th house with dreams and like this unconscious, subconscious state. Um, but in classical, like ancient astrology, the ninth house was more associated with those things, especially dreams,
Right.
and being in this sort of liminal space. Which, I mean, I think there's so many similarities between the 12th and the ninth, but them both being, um, they're both cadent houses, and all of the cadent houses have to do with sort of this like liminal state, being sort of like in between worlds. What is that called? Metacosmos, I think, is like
Mm,
the term for that. But yeah, being in this in between state where you're neither here nor there, and then the ninth and the third house, that often has to do with like travel. You know, you're in between worlds in that way.
yeah.
Often also has to do with divination, as those are the houses associated with the moon, the sun and the moon. The moon being associated with the third house, the house of the goddess,
Right.
the ninth being associated with the sun, the house of God. And yeah, being in divinatory states or states of ritual, magic, any of that is also, you know, you're in between worlds. You're
That's
not
true.
really planted on
Absolutely.
earth. Um,
Absolutely.
but then we get to like the sixth and the 12th house, which has more to do with like illness. Like when you're sick, right, in the sixth house, or you're injured, you're not in the, like, you're kind of in this in between state as well,
That's really true.
where
Yeah.
you're not really able to kind of be your full self. And
Yeah.
then same in the 12th, if you're maybe have a mental illness, or you're in a place of isolation, or you can even think of it as retreat. You're not in the world, you're in this in between state. So yeah, all the cadent houses, and we're going to do a whole episode on cadent houses
Awesome.
eventually. I'm hoping to have ET on for that one, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, thinking about the 12th and the ninth in that way. But the ninth house does have that direct trine to the ascendant, whereas the 12th house is hidden.
Right.
It's truly like unseen, untouchable. Well, I shouldn't say untouchable, but like I like to think of the 12th house as like our back, where it's like you can't see it. You know, you can't
Yeah.
turn around and look at your
Yes.
back, but it's there, you can feel it.
Totally.
And something's touching your back, like you know something's touching your back. It's just trying to figure out a way to like, you have to kind of like figure out other ways to see and experience and like interact with those things. um
Yeah. That's
yeah.
definitely real.
Do you consider like hypnosis a 12th house thing, a 12th house activity?
I definitely think so. And I like this. I'm stuck on you describing it as like being on your back. Like,
Yeah.
and like I feel like from there too, other people can see it. Other people are like,
Hmm.
yeah, man, this is right, it's right there. Like it's on
Yeah.
you. And you're like, what are you talking about? And that makes that 12th house, yeah, difficult also because it's seen to kind of everyone but you.
Hmm.
And you're like, what is happening? What is this experience? I can't pinpoint it, and yet other people can kind of be like, oh, well, it kind of seems like this, and you're like,
Right, and you're like,
oh,
what?
damn, like, all right, rude. But I definitely think that I definitely see hypnosis as being connected to the 12th house. I loved you kind of posed these questions to me in our email about kind of the traditional 12th house versus like the modern 12th house.
Yeah.
um and I was thinking about that a lot because it does sort of seem to straddle or like find a common ground between both versions of it. One being, of course, much more sort of like fated or like,
Hmm.
um, you are sick forever, like this will plague you forever. This is a bad house.
Yeah, it's
Not
called a
that
bad
it's a
house.
bad house,
Traditionally,
absolutely.
yeah.
And you know, more today we kind of talk about it more like, oh, it's just the unseen, or like what,
Hmm.
you know, You just have to like, it's you and the rest of the universe, and no one can really tell you what that experience is like, and you can bypass it if you aren't really paying attention. But it is, this rich source of potential, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it kind of straddles both of those definitions of like, okay, well, it is a little faded. Like you are carrying potentially something from the
Mm-hmm.
past.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about that a lot. I'm like, I have been like this in many lives, huh? Like I've just had some bad things happen, but then I don't choose to do anything about them. Like I give up. Like, okay, so that is some karma.
That's the
Like
hopelessness.
that's
Yeah.
the hopelessness. Absolutely. So
Wow.
there is that weightiness of like, this is a bad house. Like, yeah, I think I've made some bad choices, or like I've gone about things the wrong way, even
Mm-hmm.
if it was for like the right reason. But then the more modern take of it, of like, this is a wealth of potential. I think there's absolutely a whole realm of exploration to do in there. If
Mm-hmm.
we're open to the idea of past lives, if we're open to imagining that we are made up of stuff that we can't see in our tangible day-to-day life, and that we can't necessarily explain because of something tangible or because of something that we remember, um, then we can kind of dig into this whole liminal space of potentiality. Like, okay, if this is my fate, if this is my karma, how do I change my actions in this life in order to pay that off, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that I don't repeat those same decisions? And that does require kind of digging into yourself more so than the external world invites us to, or asks us to, or tells us is even
Or gives us
reasonable or
space
important,
to.
or
Yeah.
gives us space to. Absolutely. And I like that you brought up the sixth house too, because what we don't explore kind of out here does get stuck in us in some way. We do
Mm-hmm.
feel those psychosomatic symptoms of knowing something is lingering or wrong, or calling out to us, but not having, again, like a tangible space to really explore what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely think they're connected. I really like that you brought up, I mean, you brought up all the Caden houses, but I love that you brought up the ninth house too, and that like being in between things, but that space is very different. And that's maybe the space where we talk about sort of how
Mm-hmm.
what we're studying in this 12th house. And maybe that's a way that we kind of bridge those worlds and find a way to create more space for those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I
I love that.
definitely, I feel like there's a lot, especially if we go to hypnosis as like habit breaker. I feel like other people see our vices more than we see them. And it's very, it does take a certain awareness. Again, I think that word is very
Mm-hmm.
big in hypnosis, but being willing to say, I'm going to look at this for what it is. I'm not going to look at why I have done this necessarily, or be trapped by the fact that I am doing it, but I'm just going to look at it through a detached lens,
Mm-hmm.
um, and kind of dig into it rather than being under it. I feel like that 12th
Mm-hmm.
house is kind of like, I'm under this, like it's
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
on
can
me.
very much be that. And I like how, yeah, there's a couple things you said that now I'm like, okay, Kirah, remember all the things so you don't forget. um, One, like, yeah, the fact that you kind of have to get into this liminal space in order to face these 12 house things, like that's how you kind of see behind you in a way. It's like you have to get into this like trance state, this liminal space, to even like begin to find that awareness, or to even begin to like, yeah, because like awareness of it, like how can you become aware of something that you can't see? You kind of have to like slip
Absolutely.
into this like metacosmos state. um yeah,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
that's and then also thinking about, you were saying how like in order to see that too, you like in order to not be under it, you have to kind of create some perspective. And to me, that speaks to Saturn having its joy in the 12th. And we both have Saturn in the 12th house
We sure
too.
do.
So yeah, and it's your chart ruler. Because you're Cap rising, you have Saturn and Sag in the 12th. Is it in the 12th in quadrant houses in Placidus too?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yeah, so it's firmly in there.
it's in there, yeah.
It's in there.
Mine's like in the 11th in quadrant, but it's like right on the cusp of the 12th. And
Oh, okay.
I very much feel I have a 12th house Saturn. And yeah, definitely 12th house Saturn that rules my 11th house too. Like I feel that a lot. But yeah, so yeah, thinking about Saturn as maybe not the natural ruler of the 12th, but the planet that joys there, and how the 12th house does have a lot of significations that are, you know, associated with Saturn too. So I kind of want to talk about that. But yeah, but you're like, when you talk about distance and perspective, I think Saturn, because, you know, Saturn is the farthest planet from the sun, the farthest out planet in the solar system that we can see with the naked eye. And so it does represent like the outer reaches, the far distant,
Yeah.
like, you know, space of our little system. Um,
Absolutely.
and then yeah, Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius too, makes me think of distance and perspective in particular, and how Aquarius being this fixed sign, a fixed air sign, there is this, you know, you can kind of think of, and I learned this from Austin Coppock, the atmosphere and how that is like fixed air, and which kind of leads me
Hmm.
to the fixed star Altair, which is um, in the constellation Aquila. Aquila, I forget how to pronounce it, but it's the eagle. It's like an eagle constellation. But again, there's
Uh-huh.
this, and it's at 1 degree Aquarius in the tropical zodiac. But yeah, there's this association with, like, you know, having this bird's eye view, having this like perspective on things, um, top down perspective, where you can just see things in a clearer way, and also in a way that is um yeah, detached from the, like, you're not under it anymore, you know, you're detached from the feelings, like from the intense emotions, and you can just witness and yeah, like have this more detached perspective. So yeah, when you were saying that, that really resonated with me, like having Saturn in Aquarius too in the 12th, but also just those significations of Saturn um and its joy in the 12th. And you have a night chart too, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can see how that's, you know, it can be a little bit more challenging, like those 12th house issues um can show up as, like, you know, harsher even. Like I feel like for me, I'm just now coming around to the fact that, like, I think with my Saturn return happening, how Saturn is the most dignified planet in my chart, and how it is this very protective influence, and I'm starting to be BFFs with Saturn, but it has not always been
Yes.
the case.
Fair. Fair. Takes time.
Yeah. I'm curious what your 23rd year was like, because for me that was really, really rough.
It's the worst year of my
It's
life.
so hard. Yeah. And for anyone listening,
Oh
23
man.
is when your 12th house becomes activated by the technique annual perfections. And so, yeah, there's when you turn 23, your 12th house is like activated, and any planets in that house become activated. And the ruler of that house becomes activated as well. And, you know, maybe we should talk a little bit about Saturn, Saturn in the 12th, and kind of like 12th house, what the 12th house even means in astrology.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 12th house, the first word that always comes to mind is isolation.
Uh-huh.
But really, I see it as this, it's space away. It's space away from the rest of the world. It's space away from your like regular life, basically. And that can come in a lot of different ways. That can come on your own volition, when you maybe take a retreat. That's a 12th house sort of activity, when you decide, I just have to get away, I have to, maybe it's going on a meditation retreat or monastery, or maybe you're just like, it's a 12th house thing to just kind of like leave your house and go into the woods all by yourself and just be there. Um, it's not necessarily vacation, it can be, but to me, the 12th house is a lonely place, meaning like you're supposed to be alone there. It's like
Yeah.
your place. um and it can be very lonely, it can be very like awesome for some people. So yeah, it's like 12th house can be on your own accord, and it also cannot be by your own accord. 12th house is also where we find things like prisons and hospitals and institutions where folks who, against most of the time against their own will, are kind of put in these institutions and places that are in the outskirts of society, that are completely isolated from the rest of, what's happening in society and culture. And so yeah, the 12th house is, it's about being away, but whether or not you chose to be away, that's another question.
That's so real.
And that's where Saturn comes in. It's like, um Saturn's all about boundaries and walls, and that boundary can be a prison. It can be a prison that you put yourself in. It can be a prison that you were put in, um, and yeah, or again, or that can be your own little private retreat space. It doesn't necessarily have to be this place of imprisonment. um, but yeah, regardless, this is where you get distance, right? This is where you're completely yeah, you find yourself in this space away from everyone else. And in this space is where you're kind of like faced with your own spirit, you're faced with your soul, your psyche, and there's this need to um yeah, face that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And
Yeah.
to like kind of find a way to root in that, to find a way to kind of develop a sense of personal foundation
Hmm.
in that sense of solitude.
Yeah.
I Gosh, now I'm like so many things you just said. I mean, I love the kind of distinguishing between, like, we're acknowledging it is definitely a solitary space, but how you end up there is definitely a question. And I loved you saying like maybe you chose to go in there, but you're also still like really isolated, and it
Hmm.
can very much become, I'm thinking like, what am I thinking when I go into that 12th house space? And sometimes it is very much like, especially for me having it in Sagittarius, I'm like, I like to go on solo journeys. Like
Hmm.
I really find myself when I'm out in the world by myself without a huge structured plan, maybe like a loose plan. And I kind of let myself wander. And then all of a sudden I understand, like, I'm like, oh, and now I understand everything. But it can also very much be kind of used as a weapon against other people. For me, I can be like, you don't understand me, and now I have to go hide in here, like I have no
Hmm.
choice.
Hmm.
So I love that you really like broke that down, because it's true, sometimes it is feeling like, oh, what I'm experiencing is not reflected back to me in my outer world right now, and so I have to go in here because this is the only place where I have this validated for me, or where I know
Hmm.
that this is safe. um, and sometimes it's, you said monastery too. And for my senior project in high school, I tried to go stay at a monastery, but I
Oh
was
my
too
gosh.
young. And they
Oh.
were like, we didn't know that you weren't 18, but you can't be here. And I was like, but this is all I want. And I like thinking back on that, like,
Yeah.
why was 17-year-old me trying to go stay at a monastery? Like, what? Like, what? Who
Well,
are you?
17 is a sixth house year, so you were feeling that cadent life.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, and I like that setup too as another hypnosis 12th house connection, because you did really set it up as it can be a space that you choose to explore. It can be a space that you choose to make your own, that can feel like a retreat. And I think that's definitely what hypnosis aims to do, is to create a space that is just yours, that you can retreat into in a way that feels comfortable and inviting and safe to you, and not where you're being locked up by someone,
Right.
and not where you're needing to lock yourself up in order to get away from someone, but really just having that accessible to you to kind of tap into when you need it in order to. And again, it is a lot like meditation. That's sort of like, okay, I'm exiting the physical world for a moment, and I'm just going to focus on my breathing, and I'm just going to um, be within myself for this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think hypnosis aims to, because we all have a 12th house, whether or not there's anything in there. You know, there's a planet in our chart that rules that house. There's a planet in our chart that is in charge of what happens in that space. And so I think being able to use that in a way that feels constructive or protective, rather than a trap, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because another like traditional association with the 12th house, I mean, it's called the house of bad spirit. That's what it's
Right.
traditionally called. And like unpacking that a little bit and thinking like, what the hell does that mean? Um, and the 11th house is the house of good spirit, right? So, and that's where Jupiter joys. Um, and so, yeah, thinking about like to me, what that means is this is where you find mental health issues, because it's where
Yeah.
you're literally faced with your spirit. And if that can't be contained, if you can't face it in a way that, is supportive and yeah, it just, to me, like one of my favorite phrases when talking about the 12th house is like, this is where you become undone.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and often when it like what 12th house transits or activations feel like to me at least is like you're spilling out from the inside out, and it's really hard to contain. It's hard to contain your spirit here in the 12th house. And um again, like the 12th house being this container, the Saturnian space. Also, before I forget to say this, thinking about like the association of the world card with Saturn, and like thinking about like the world card in the traditional Smith-Waite deck is this person, um, who's like surrounded by this reef, and then there's like the four fixed signs in the corners of the card too. So that it literally is this space, like the world is a space, right? um, and this person's like kind of floating in the middle of the space. And I really feel that way about the 12th house, that like it is a space, and it's like this contained space that again, like you can choose to enter into, or sometimes you're thrown into it without maybe choosing to be. But it's like, what do you do within that space? And that space is like, it's like your psyche, that's your spirit.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes it's hard to contain yourself within that space. Sometimes it's hard to like hold on, like contain your spirit. Sometimes you want to fight with your spirit, and it's like
Yeah.
both of you can't be in there at the same time. And
Oh
so
my God. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, it, to me, thinking about the 12th house like that, and then thinking again about like how hypnosis is this way to sort of um enter that space, and in a way that is structured, and it's like, the friendly Saturn, the nice day chart Saturn, that wants to hold you in that space and like wrap its rings around you, and help you feel contained um instead of it feeling like a prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my night chart Saturn being up there, like, I want to distract you with all of these scary thoughts. And like, I'm just gonna wrap you up in these rings and throw you around.
Yes, but
Um,
you have Saturn conjunct Uranus, right?
I do, I sure
Yeah.
do. And my series is sandwiched in there also.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
and they're all
Yeah.
square my moon, so
Oh,
it's
lovely.
a fun. Which is my sect leader, so I feel
Yeah.
really good
And
about.
yeah, so you have your
Yeah.
sun and your moon and your Jupiter. Do you have Mercury there
Yes, and
too?
Mercury's in there
Yeah.
too.
All
Yep.
in Pisces in the third house.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's a circus a little bit,
But
but
having
I
that 12th house ruled by that like super powerful Jupiter, um, who's also ruling over like your luminaries and your
yeah,
Mercury, your translator, that's really interesting. No
it's a very interesting
wonder.
sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm really loving what you're saying though about like Saturn in the 12th house and this sort of call to root in the intangible. Like
Hmm.
looking at the rest of the chart, here is what your outer world is going to look like. And then at the end of the day, there's still this unexplainable space in which no one else can really see what you're doing. And it's kind of this lovely, like, accept all of you. Like, just
Yeah.
know that this stuff that doesn't have a space on Earth is also still part of this full package. And we still have to incorporate it into
Hmm.
us. Even if it's just for us, or especially if it's just for us. But I'm thinking of Saturn as like my Saturn maybe is kind of like, I hold the key to all these stories, and you're gonna run around and freak out and feel like you don't know why you feel certain ways. But if you want to know, I'm right here. Like you can
Yeah.
just open it up
I
and
like
you
how
can come
your
in.
Saturn seems like, I like how it's still like night chart Saturn, but you impersonate it as this very like Jupiterian, like, yeah, I'm really scary, but like but
I
like
mean,
I hold the
yeah,
keys, you know.
he
Um
is. I think he's kind of like a trickster up there in my mind.
yeah,
It's
I
this
love
like,
that. Especially
I've
conjunct Uranus, like Saturn and
totally.
Uranus, like fucking with
What is
you.
this now? What is this now? What are you gonna do
Yeah,
with this?
changing
Like,
it up, changing up the space. Like it's like
absolutely.
strobe lights inside of your space.
Yeah, my Saturn is like a real clown.
Wow.
But yeah, my part of fortune is there, and it's definitely this
Mm-hmm.
like get to know this guy,
Mm-hmm.
because it can feel very heavy and it can feel very isolating and it can feel very like I'm never gonna understand why this is my space. Like why is this space that I have to go
Yeah.
into? But hypnosis has made all of it, it does bring a joy to it. It makes it not a game, but it is kind of an activity of sorts. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, there are stories in here and I understand why I feel these things. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm not as afraid of trickster Saturn of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
dangling the keys at me. And if anything, um, I've definitely learned so much more about myself by exploring those stories, even though they're not stories from this life. And at this point, going through hypnosis training, I've done a bunch of past life regression now, and I've seen a whole bunch of past lives. I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand why I give up on stuff. Or like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I understand why I feel like I have no authority. It's because I was a medicine woman in the jungle, and then the settlers came and they wanted me to marry
Mm.
one of them and I didn't want to. And so they killed me. Like, like, yeah, no wonder I think everything is
No
trash.
wonder. Yeah. That
um,
explains it.
that explains it. This is why I don't trust anybody. Um, but it makes it is that perspective that we were talking about when there's stories. And I think that's especially my Sagittarius Saturn too. Like when it's a story, when we can look at it as a narrative, it's depersonalized. It's not something that is like crippling me from the inside. It's something that I can look at and say, oh, so the story start to finish is this. And that's where I got mad and that's where I fucked up. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've learned something. But I couldn't present that to someone as though that was like, here's the experience,
Yeah.
from point A to Z, that makes sense in this tangible realm, that you believe. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's kind of like this is my own lexicon of my library up here,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
does give context to how the rest of my chart works, or
Mm-hmm.
again, like giving you control over what that space looks like. I've been afraid of this space. I try to distract from this space. I don't like the stories that are in this space. Okay, I'm exploring the stories that are in this space, and they actually give me a lot of context. And now I'm much less scared of exploring what this space is. And if anything, I can intentionally design it to support me.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Yeah.
decide to come in here. I can decide to engage in how I want to use this.
Yeah, make it less scary.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
scary clown Saturn turns out to
Scary
not
clown
not
Saturn.
that bad.
Saturn's like, wow, you are trashing me right now. But but I think, you know, we've touched upon this a little bit, but our external world does not make space for mental health, especially the American external world.
Yes.
We distract from our mental wellness through consumerism and capitalism and retail therapy instead of real therapy. And it's no wonder that we feel we feel very isolated in a world full of billions of people, and we don't feel safe. And I think that that's especially stressful. We don't feel safe in our own inner worlds, and it makes us feel less safe in our outer world.
Yeah.
And again, that sort of sixth house of illness, those psychosomatic symptoms of not feeling like you have space to even explore what your inner world is, let alone will have the support, you know, to facilitate some sort of wellness from that place without it being kind of prescribed something, or you know, you're labeled as something and then you're supposed to have all the answers. And so I think it is a really important time for us to be exploring these intangible spaces and to know more about ourselves and to trust ourselves. I think we feel much less likely to trust ourselves in this modern world because there's, and not even modern, we talked about the history of like the history of mental health is horrifying.
Yes.
It is like truly truly horrifying. So we're carrying generations and generations of compressed, compiled trauma. So no wonder we are, you know, this generation that's really trying to unpack that and work through it and figuring out holistic approaches to that. So
yes, I feel like that's part of what Pluto and Scorpio, our generation, will be known for, is like how seriously we take mental health and our mental emotional well-being. And how we recognize trauma in a way that I feel like older generations never have, and obviously like people in older generations have individually, but I think as like a group, our generation is so trauma conscious, in that we're like, I think we're the first generation for sure that like normalize like therapy and mental health. Like,
yes,
like
absolutely.
everyone has a therapist. Like, I mean, I don't, but hopefully I will soon. But like everyone talks about it like it's no big deal, where like that was not the case. Like even growing up, not the case at all. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot about the millennials. And I love what you were saying too, like kind of pulling back to like, we just, as a society, especially in the West, especially in the US, it's like there isn't space to get into your space. And this year in particular has offered a lot of people that opportunity to just be with themselves and explore their psyches in a way that they haven't before, and just like slow down, which I feel like has been really meaningful for a lot of folks. Um, and in general, like when people are in perfections or having transits through the 12th house or even through the 8th house, I always tell my clients, like, this is your opportunity to have inhabit that space. Whereas like, you know, in our day-to-day lives, we're not really investigating like our traumas and like our psyche, and like our, you know, we don't have the time. We're busy with other things. Cough, cough, capitalism.
Exactly.
No time to focus on ourselves.
Right.
But these like 12th house transits and 12th house activations, and same with the 8th house, though I tell my clients, like, this is your time to do this. Whereas like, you know, before you've been focused on your relationship or getting a new job or whatever, like when you're 31 and you're in the 8th house year, that's your time to like move through some traumas and process some shit that you just haven't been able to. If when you're 35 or you're 23, what's 35 plus 12, 47? Yeah, like that's your period of time to be in your 12th house and really investigate yourself and explore your psyche. That's your, like, you're floating in that in your little 12th house space. And so yeah, I think it's important to just like make friends with that. And also with the 12th house, I'm always like, let yourself fall apart. Like, let yourself come apart, because if you're trying to you cannot like try to hold yourself together when you're in the 12th house is nearly impossible, and you're gonna run into more issues trying to like, contain all of that. And you figure out how to contain it, but you have to let yourself fall apart first to figure out how to put yourself back together.
Absolutely. That's so real. Yeah. I'm just like stuck in the visual of like laying down in the 12th house and just melting, like just having you like liquefy, and then being like, okay, and now my next state is
yes, yeah. I mean, those are like my 12th house Saturn return musings from this year.
Yes,
like, oh,
absolutely.
I'm supposed to just do nothing and eat Oreos all day. Got it.
That was such a, yeah. I love talking about our Saturn returns because that was so real. That was, literally everything I had been doing, I just started moving away backwards slowly. And I was just like, what is happening? I don't hello?
Yeah.
I don't.
Did you have astrology at that point?
That was when I got into astrology.
Okay.
I had always been fascinated by it, but that was when I could not grasp anything else that I had been doing up until that point, and I needed answers, and I started digging deeper, and I was like, oh, this is what's happening. Okay. And so it was really like fully embodying going into that space and just being like, I don't know what's happening out there, but I'm gonna be in here for a while. So yeah, that was definitely when I started studying hardcore and really just getting to know my own chart and tying things together and recognizing, oh, this is okay. And then I got here. Okay, got it. And I love you brought up the 23rd year being your 12th house perfection, because it was at 22, right before that, I also had my Saturn Sun opposition. So everything fell apart then as like an appetizer. And then it was like, and now what the hell is happening?
Yes. Oh my God. So for me, it was like my 12th house year was Saturn Sun conjunction the day of my birthday. So there was an exact cazimi, and it was in the 12th house of my Saturn return, or sorry, my solar return.
Oh my
and
God.
I was in this 12th house year. My 12th house is Aquarius. I have Saturn in the 12th. I was the most depressed I had ever been. I was unemployed. And I was living in a tiny, tiny room with no windows, in an apartment that only had windows in my roommate's room. So I was like in this literal, like, contained space, fixed air, like Aquarius. Like, there was not much airflow. I had like a little fan in my room, but that's it. And I was just forced to be with myself day after day after day. I didn't have work. I just was by myself in this space. And I wasn't completely alone, because my Saturn rules my 11th house. So friends are always a part of it. And I did get to see people. I actually made friends with like a lot of people in my building. We would just smoke weed together all the time and, commiserate. I had a couple friends going through Saturn return at that time too. So it's like, it was really difficult. I remember like I was at my most anxious I had ever been, and maybe not ever. My whole early 20s was just like anxiety.
It's all terrible. So.
It's all terrible, right? But I was like extremely anxious, and just depressed as fuck, like very Saturn, like
Yeah,
stuck in, it felt imprisoned. I felt like I was stuck. Um,
absolutely.
and which is, I think, a common experience with that, with 12th house stuff. But I was into astrology and I got to see, oh, that's what's happening. Okay.
There
At
we
least I
are.
know it ends here, and it did.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah, but
that's so real.
I feel like, kind of like, talking about hypnosis again, yeah, it being such a great tool for um getting into that 12th house space, like we were saying, and like seeing yourself and having that perspective. I keep picturing the world card
I
in
know
my
that's a nice
head.
image now. I'm gonna hold on to
Yeah,
that.
just like
Yeah,
floating in your little space. uh,
totally.
SpongeBob floating.
You're my little cherubs and my little.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
um yeah, how how do you suggest people, sort of like, if anyone's out there listening right now, they're like, I want to explore this, like, what would you suggest? Like, I know that you can do self hypnosis. Would you suggest seeing a practitioner? Like, how do people go about it?
I think it's definitely helpful to get in touch with a practitioner just to not need to think so much about kind of the structure of hypnosis as you're getting into it so that you can
Mhm.
really relax and have someone else kind of steer the ship for the first time or couple of times. But I do think that kind of getting into getting into it that way and maybe taking kind of what works well for you and starting to build that into your own practice is cool. That's kind of how I started doing new tapes, which was and will be. It has returned, which is meant to be a really accessible way to get into it. So it's not like, come lay on this couch and I'm going to dim the lights. It's like you're in your own space. You can be wherever's comfortable for you. Um, and that is sort of like a guided way to set up the pre-talk kind of on your own, and then I guide us through trance. But yeah, I think initially getting into it, it might be good to see a practitioner just to establish that level of trust with the help of someone else, because
Mhm.
it, as we have just spent the last hour discussing, it can be tricky to go into that space on your own if you aren't comfortable there yet, or if you're not necessarily sure as to what you're looking for.
Mhm.
um, I think seeing someone is a great idea and a great way to get into that for yourself, and then you can definitely integrate practices for yourself from there, for sure.
Awesome. Cool. And if anyone out there is listening, or they'd be able to schedule a session with you, are you doing
Yes,
that? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
I am
cool.
officially taking clients now.
Yes.
I have everything set up. And so, yeah, I'm definitely ready for that. And if anyone wants to kind of test drive it, New Tapes is something that I'll be putting on at every new moon. And it's kind of an astro hypnosis, or like an astrology focused hypnosis practice. Kind of utilizing the new moon energies as a way to set intentions for what we want to change, working with the astrological transits impacting the new moon and using that to our advantage, kind of knowing what we're walking into. Um, and so it's kind of a fun, like, group exercise in terms of organizing your thoughts and figuring out what you like, outlining what you would like to be working on for that month. And then we're on Instagram, so we're going through trance together, and so it's a casual way to kind of explore something that might feel intimidating or
That's amazing.
like very formal. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like I am going to say appetizer again for some reason, but it's like
I
a
like
little
that.
hypnosis appetizer.
Is it like on Instagram Live? It's gonna be
Yeah.
okay.
The first one will be for the Scorpio New
Yes.
Moon on Saturday the 14th,
14.
and I
Yeah.
believe I scheduled it for 11:30 a.m. Pacific time.
Cool.
And it should run about 30 to 40 minutes. So just a way for everyone to kind of come with your notebook and,
Yes.
do some writing exercises and then go through a trance together. So
Awesome. Yes. And so this episode comes out about 2 weeks before that. So
dope.
if you're listening, definitely check out New Tapes. I'm really excited for that, because The Scorpio New Moon this year is a pretty powerful one in that, well, for me, it's like on my Mars. So I feel very,
Yeah.
but also it happens the day of Mars station direct. So Mars is stationing
Yes.
direct during it. We have the final Jupiter Pluto conjunction as
It's
well.
true.
There's a lots of
There's
intense,
a
powerful
lot.
energies happening
And then the sun
that
and the moon
weekend.
will sextile Pluto and Jupiter. So
Mhm,
that'll be
mhm.
a nice little assist.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really good one to start on. I'm
I'm
really excited.
excited. It's just
Cool.
like it felt right. And I love that feeling. It's like I'm not
Yes.
pushing. It's just it's happening. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And isn't your midheaven in is your midheaven in Scorpio?
It is 20 degrees Libra.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. I was like, I thought it was ruled by Venus, but yeah, it happening like a new moon in your 11th and you're doing this community offering.
Ah,
That's
yeah,
great. Oh, I
totally.
love that.
Oh, that feels so great. That feels great.
Well,
Ah,
Taylor, where can people find you? Like, if people want to find this Instagram, I mean, we'll have everything linked below too, but
totally.
yeah, let us
You
know.
can find me. Everything I do is under That's So Pisces. So that's my Instagram handle, my Twitter handle, and that's also my website, that's so Pisces.com.
You are so Pisces.
I am very Pisces.
I love it. And yeah, you can book a reading, you can book a hypnosis session, Reiki, all the things.
Yeah.
Cool.
Ask more questions. Definitely feel free to
Yes.
reach out and inquire. I love talking about hypnosis. So if
And you
anyone's
also
like,
do
tell
Astro
me
Squad,
more.
right?
Yeah, Mondays on Instagram Live. My friend Vanessa Bartlett and I, yes, do Astro Squad. And it's just like a casual conversation about whatever is happening in the stars at the moment. And it's a great, fun arena for people to kind of chime in, like, yeah, this new moon is fucking me up. um, my
Awesome.
Mars. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sweet.
having a lot of
Yeah.
fun, like just conversations, putting thoughts out into the world.
Awesome. Well, yes, everyone, please go check out my good friend Taylor and all of her offerings. And yeah, it was so nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been such a blast, and I've been looking forward to this for a moment. So
Yeah. We've
I'm
been
glad
talking
we
about
got to
this for a
dig in. I
while.
know, like since summer, but yeah, so it's been really good, everything lining up timing wise, and just like, I don't know, feeling so ready for this moment. So I'm
Yes.
really grateful to get
Oh,
to talk about this
yay. I'm
and
so
our
glad.
Saturns.
Yes. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Kirah.